Alright, how many of you know about fighting game archetypes? For those who aren't familiar with fighting games, an easy way to think of fighting game archetypes is to think of them like different RPG rules. Most RPG rules have a specific function. They excel at one thing and lack affinity for something else. An archer or ranger class isn't going to do well in close quarters combat. Neither is a berserker going to start throwing magical attacks. So why is this important? Well, knowing what your character is good at tells you what their game plan is, and how you should approach the opponent. The same thing can help you against your opponent's character. If you know what your opponent is good at, you could try to avoid or nullify that advantage and turn the fight in your favor. Things like different speeds or damage output, and even the weight can tell you how much you need to know about your character and what archetype they fit in. Throughout this video, I'll compare these archetypes to RPG classes to help those who are new to fighting games. Let's start with the Shoto archetype. The Shoto archetype is similar to a fighter class. They tend to be well-rounded, having a tool for every situation. They're a jack of all trades, master of none. You want a projectile? The Shoto's got them. Want an invincible reversal? They also have that too. A forward advancing special move for closing space and a combo extender? You don't even have to ask. Shoto archetypes are usually considered beginner friendly because they have everything you need to get started. But as I said earlier, they're a jack of all trades, master of none. Shoto characters do everything alright, but another archetype can probably do it way better. But don't let that stop you from playing them if you like the idea of being versatile in every situation. Most main characters in fighting games are given the Shoto archetype. Think Ryu from Street Fighter or Soul from Guilty Gear. Next we have the Rushdown archetype. Rushdown archetypes are more akin to the Berserker class. They excel at putting a lot of pressure on the opponent with their fast mobility and attacks, while also doing a lot of damage. However, in exchange, if they commit too hard and whiff an attack, they're more prone to getting punished. The Rushdown archetype is one of the most popular archetypes because they're straightforward and bring a huge adrenaline rush, always making the match fast-paced and intense. Some examples are Giovanna from Guilty Gear and Akihiko from Persona 4 Arena. For our next archetype, we have the Grappler. This archetype shares similarities with the tank because they usually have either the most defense or health. However, that's where the similarities end. The Grappler class wants one thing and one thing only: to grab you.
Oh no!
Grapplers are generally very big and slow, but with their large HP pool and defense, they power through the opponent's attacks to get in and grab their opponent. These grabs lead into big damage, making them a force to be reckoned with. Grapplers are one of the most hated archetypes because their grabs enforce a lot of fear into people, and all it takes is one grab to turn the game around in their favor. Think of Zangief from Street Fighter or Taker from BlazBlue. The only archetype hated more than grapplers are zoners. Zoners are the fighting game equivalent to the archer or ranger class. Zoners excel at long distances, forcing their opponents to stay away from them. Zoners strive on making their opponents impatient, as zoners don't evoke any kind of interaction from the opponent's perspective. When you hear someone says, "stop spamming," it's most likely they're fighting a zoner. However, zoners have a big weakness. They're almost entirely defenseless when the opponent finally gets in. Zoners are usually slow fighters in close quarters, so once the opponent gets in, it's hard for the zoner to get them out. Two examples of this would be Peacock from Skullgirls and Lu13 from BlazBlue. Then there's the Puppet archetype. They share a lot in common with the Summoner class. Puppet characters are usually considered the hardest archetype because you're controlling both the puppet and the puppeteer at the same time. However, if you master this archetype, you're rewarded immensely by how powerful the character can be. The puppet archetype can suffocate the enemy with pressure because they're essentially blocking two characters. They also dish out a lot of damage and hit you with tricky mix-ups. Puppet archetype does have its issues though. If you can get rid of the puppet, you're at a huge advantage. Puppet characters tend to be weak or incomplete without their partner in crime. Also, the difficulty of the character can definitely take its toll on the person playing them. With the high execution barrier it takes to play this archetype, you're bound to make a mistake. We're humans at the end of the day. We can't always play perfectly. Examples of this archetype are Misfortune from Skullgirls and Shadow Labrys from Persona 4 Arena. Next up is my personal favorite archetype, the Set Play archetype. They share a trait with the Rogue or Thief class in which they are very nimble but lack defense, but that's where the shared traits ends. Set play characters are more deliberate in their game plan as they are famously known for knocking down their opponent so they can make a calculated setup to force an ambiguous mix-up. This archetype is known to have the biggest snowball effect, as if you aren't able to stop them in time, they can steal the game by looping their aggressive mix-ups. However, as I said before, they lack defense. This archetype usually has low defense and struggles in neutral to get the hit to run their game plan. Examples of this archetype are Meteor from Guilty Gear and Cagliostro from Grand Blue Fantasy Versus. Now the next two aren't exactly archetypes, but they play a huge role in how a character can be played, and I think they're worth mentioning. So our next archetype, I guess, we have the Stance Switch archetype. Stance characters have the ability to change modes, giving them a difference in either movement, attacks, or both. This gives them an edge because they have more attacks at their disposal, but playing a stance character requires you to learn two different characters essentially. Examples of stance characters are Narmaya from Grand Blue Fantasy Versus or Zeku from Street Fighter. Then there's the Gimmick archetype. The Gimmick archetype is a certain plan that requires luck, surprise, or for your opponent to have a lack of knowledge on your game plan. It's effective against newer players or opponents who don't know better, but well-prepared opponents may have a counter to your game plan. This doesn't mean the archetype isn't strong, as it can definitely snowball and overwhelm your opponent. Examples of this are Faust from Guilty Gear and Hero from Super Smash Bros. That's about it for the archetypes, how they play, their strengths, and their weaknesses. There's nothing wrong with searching what archetype your character is or just hopping into training mode to figure out. So the next time you play a fighting game, you'll hopefully have a better time understanding how a character works.